Hello, welcome to our podcast, Everyday Ordinary, Extraordinary Women. I'm here with Christina. Christina, you want to say hi?
Welcome, everyone.
So, we were inspired to create this podcast after pondering this question: what would the world look like where we can be inspired by every person? Like, usually, we are so quick to compare and judge ourselves and others. And when we do that, everybody's losing. Depending on my point of view, I can either feel small because I come out lacking, or I can feel arrogant and dismissive because I feel superior. And those are the only two options, and neither of those options make us feel good. So here's our thought: someone's everyday normal is someone else's extraordinary. Judgment comes from first impressions, and we invite you, the listener, to go beyond first impressions and see the magic everywhere. There's inspiration at every corner, in everyone, if we're willing to look. And today we have the pleasure and the honor and the privilege to be here with Elena. So Elena, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. As mentioned, my name is Elena. I am from Cairns, Australia. I am a co-design and health consumer representative, so I work helping to create more inclusive and accessible services and platforms in health and in the disability community in Australia. I am also an aspiring artist, and I've designed my own apparel brand, Chronic Youth Australia, that the aim is to eventually fund resources for youth that are bedbound and housebound and socially isolated, have more of a outlet and open up their world a little bit more.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, Elena, your mom was on the podcast just recently, and she was sharing about you, and I'm inspired. We've met. I don't know. What is it, like 14 years, 12 years ago, I think. And when we came to Australia, and I know from the other side how challenging it might be sometimes to be a person with disabilities, right? I know that well, not me, but I know from secondhand, right? I know that when I walk in some place and people see my son in a wheelchair, they talk to me instead of him. I see, I see those challenges, and I know it's not easy. And I commend you and thank you for being here and for being willing to talk to us. Um, so thank you. Now, if we really knew you, what would we know?
I think probably I've always been a pretty nervy person and pretty anxious. So I've always gone towards creative things or about a million different hobbies. I definitely have taken on my mum's love of learning. Anyone that works into our house, even through the years, if when things are difficult, we're both always working on different things, and there'll be some different project out and about, or different games or new things that we're picking up. So it's something I've taken on that from her that I love and has always been consistent in everything I do. I think my body probably makes me slow down in a good way. Otherwise, I just wouldn't stop doing things and learning and exploring.
That's really powerful, right? It's your body's telling you. So there's no other way, sorry, than to slow down, right? But your curiosity is still there. And I guess that's part of what keeps you going.
Definitely. I think I forgot to mention before, but I am deaf and visually impaired, so I'm low vision, and I also have a genetic chronic illness that kind of multifacets as a disability. There's a rare illness that took a very long time to get diagnosed. So that's been a huge part of my world, is trying to navigate that and the roadblocks that come with that. I wasn't born deaf. I went deaf almost about 4 years ago. So I had to learn a new language, a new way to communicate, new everything basically. But it's those small things that, my mom implemented when I was a kid, that other things I went back to with creativity and finding outlets. Yeah, that's pretty much what my world consists of and has since I was a kid. That doesn't really change no matter where we end up or what stage my body's at.
It's such a good point, Alina. You know, we have different ups and downs in our life, right? And sometimes we're high energy, sometimes low energy, sometimes we have, some disabilities. And then you had, whatever happened 4 years ago that really sent you down this path of with your hearing and visual impairment. But the curiosity is always there, pushing you to find what's next inside of what you have available to you. So can you speak to that a little bit more? Like, what's the superpower that you have that has you always looking for how can I make the most of the situation that I'm given in the moment?
That's such a cool question. I thought about that a little bit, and I think for me that has always been body language and reading people. And I had that from a pretty young age where I could pick up on cues, and I found it really interesting because sometimes tone or things get misinterpreted, but people's bodies tell you so much. And then I went deaf. And people always talk about, oh, just a sense when you're deaf. Oh, wow, your eyesight must be amazing, or things like that. And I was like, oh, I'm actually visually impaired, so no. But body language is how I know the difference between when I'm out or even in the house, whether it's an emergency or whether everything is okay. Is those little micro cues the more I'm around a person. I can tell just from the way that their fingers change and how they hold it in their palm or the way they move their shoulders, how a conversation is going, whether it's a positive conversation or whether maybe they're getting frustrated or the person across from them is being rude. It's really easy to pick up once you find those cues, but it kind of heightened once I couldn't hear anymore.
I can totally get what you're saying as a massage therapist, and your mom's a massage therapist too. So that touch that you get, like there's always clients who are never going to tell you if the pressure's too much, but you see them, they start tensing their body, and you're like, oh, okay, like I get it. Now we need to adjust and move on. So that's like your sixth sense, right? Like it's even beyond that touch. You really, it's just a superpower, right? You just can feel what's going on with the people that are around you. Pretty brilliant.
Definitely. It can be a little bit too much sometimes. You've got to find that balance of, I had that struggle when I was younger, especially hypersensitive to things and people's emotions. And I think Jeff has given a little bit of a blocker because I can't hear the tone of voice or how loud their voice is unless it's yelling. That's about as much as I can hear. So it's given me that little bit of a barrier that in some ways helps, but in some ways makes me more nervous because I usually have no idea what's happening around me, or I'm like 5 minutes behind everyone else.
Yeah, I can get that. I can get that that's good and bad, right? Sometimes it's better not to know, and sometimes it's disconcerting not to know, right? Yeah.
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 Which is kind of like the problem with text messages, right? Like it's hard to know what's the energy behind it when you're reading it as opposed to when someone's actually communicating it in person. Which is why it's always great to not take things personally, right? Because if you don't take anything personally, then it just is what it is. It's just a communication.
Definitely, I think that was a strange overlap when I went deaf because I was always someone who loved phone calls. I wasn't much of a texter. I always loved that verbal communication for that reason. And then my entire world became text. TV is text. Your interviews, calls, like video calls for work like this is text on top of text on top of text. And it is so easy to misinterpret tone or get confused because I can't hear the tone behind it. And it's like that all the time. But when you're reading, because I'm on a phone when I communicate with people that are hearing, I have a text to speech app on my phone because most people don't know sign language. But I can't read what's being said and look at them at the same time. So I have to pick one or the other. But it makes it so hard because I think they're serious and then I look up and everyone's laughing or they're grinning and it's some joke that I haven't realized is a joke because I've read it as facts.
Mm. That must be quite challenging sometimes.
Definitely has its ups and downs, but we find a way of humor. My mom loves like pulling my leg with it a bit of I'm very gullible and I will fall for the same joke. It doesn't matter how many times. Definitely like gives it a highlight.
Yes. So tell us something funny, like a funny, silly, or embarrassing story. It can be all together or just one, whichever you choose.
I should go in relation to that sort of same topic. When I first went deaf, I thought I could lip read. I could, in fact, not lip read. Deaf people don't actually have FBI lip reading skills. Most of them have hearing devices that assist with sound that makes it easier. I do not have said magical devices. And we had a family friend had walked up to the house and it was the first time I'd seen them since I was deaf. And she's smiling, chatting with mom, and they're laughing. And I've kind of learned if everyone's laughing, you laugh, and then you kind of still follow what's happening. And so she was talking to my mom. She was actually telling her that she'd just been in a car accident, and that's why she had a new car. I did not realize she'd been in a car accident. And so I went as far to tell her how happy I was for her and how amazing that was that she's been in a car accident. Not realizing that was the actual topic because she was smiling and she like didn't look distressed. And I thought she was explaining how she got this new car, not realizing that, yeah, there was not a great meaning behind it. So my mom had to kind of sweep in and explain because I was like getting really overly excited for her and she's starting to look really confused.
That's brilliant. You know, and I want to say that stuff like that happens whether you can hear well or not. It's just really we think that that it's just like tied to but I can tell you I'm in a room with a lot of people. I don't understand what they're saying. If it gets too noisy, I just cannot, like, then it's too much input and I make up stuff, right? Like you. And I believe we all do that in certain ways. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Because no one wants to be the one like, excuse me, I didn't hear that, or what? Like, well, my acupuncturist is from China, and sometimes I can't understand what she's saying. And sometimes I go, yeah, and sometimes I go, wait, what was that? Wait, could you say that again? I'm sorry, I really didn't get that. Could you write it so I understand? Then I'm like, oh, but most of the times we won't go that far, right? Because we're just too embarrassed to be like, I don't get what you're communicating at all. So that's, we can all relate to that one. Alina, what would you say your biggest lesson has been so far? I mean, you've had quite a big journey in your short life so far, but I'm sure you have some big lessons that you've learned along the way.
I think probably the biggest lesson I've had in regards to that would probably be growing up with an illness that wasn't diagnosed. So last time I saw Martina, I was unwell, but we had no idea. Like my mom had a feeling, I knew something wasn't right in my body, but every road we turned was like hitting a roadblock of no, you're just overly anxious. I can't count the amount of anxiety talks I had with doctors from like 8 to 18. They still don't really stop even with a label now. But it was at every road I turned. I had no idea what was happening with my body, but I was adapting to it anyway. So I knew that if I ate, I couldn't run around. So I hated recess because there wasn't enough time for me to recover from eating and not feel like I was really, really ill and a lot of pain to then get to play with my friends. So I started drawing and writing at recess and finding other things that I could do because I knew that X plus C equaled B, like it would not have a good outcome, even though any of the adults I spoke to, aside from my mum, would not believe me. They would brush it off. And that's still how I've coped now going into being an adult, is that same thing. I can't access the world the same way. I can't access a lot of social situations. It's still that math game. If I want to do that thing, what is that going to mean? What are the things that I could have to deal with them? What will be the outlay of it? And it's that constant toss-up, but having those outlets, that have what helped the most and has kind of shaped who I am and what I do with work and everything surrounding it. But it's also why I advocate the way I do. And especially, you know, with medical systems and doing the co-designing, I really push for people to be more open to hearing from kids and not dismissing things and not just looking at their family backgrounds or like the socio-economical aspects of their world, but looking and really listening because kids are so smart. Like they know what's happening in their body, even if they don't know what's happening with their body. So I've been trying to figure out a way to bring that into what I'm doing with chronic youth and giving young people more resources so that they can find those similar outlets, because it doesn't matter where you go in life, you're going to often hear the same praise with doctors, the social things depending on the ups and downs with health. But having those outlets is what's helped me the most. And being consistent from what I've learned, yes.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So let me just tell you what I hear in that A, you're unstoppable, and 2, you're adaptable, and 3, you're incredibly creative and amazing. You just don't let these blocks stop you. You just keep being like, okay, what can I handle next? What can I handle next? And that's really cool.
And for me, what I hear is that the lesson was that you have to find your own way of doing things, right? Which is a lesson that most of us don't learn until sometimes to our deathbed, right? That you have to find your own way of doing things and you have to keep speaking up for yourself, which is so challenging, right? It's you know, as a young person, yeah, you don't get taken into consideration. And at the same time, you know, like having had all those experiences with doctors, I can tell you that part of it is, my guess is their own impotence, right? And not wanting to admit that they don't know. And so hence the arrogance, right? It's like, oh my goodness, I went to school for all this time. I still don't know what this could be. So I'd rather be arrogant than admit that I don't know, right? Because we live in a world where admitting that you don't know is not acceptable. Still not, unfortunately. We're moving towards a different direction, but right now we're still in that place. So
It's frustrating because
yeah.
you rely on those people. Like when you're a kid, especially, there's that balance, like a power balance there of doctors in the medical system is like a superhero magic, which it is. Like they save people's lives. It's incredible, and I will always hold respect for that. But in the care for chronic conditions or undiagnosed or anything that doesn't fit in that quick, easy tick, I do get really frustrated with that attitude because I spent so much time thinking it was just me. And the more I've worked in the area of chronic illness and like connecting with other people, the more I'm seeing that it is consistent with every person I have come across since I was 14. And I'm now 21. I've not met a single person that hasn't had that same experience when it was more than an acute illness or situation, which is quite saddening, but I'm hoping the more we continue to speak up, the more people will listen and be open to being, okay with not necessarily knowing the answer, but being open and interested in learning more and seeing what they can do to help.
Absolutely. And, it is, I believe it is, the world is changing. So hopefully sooner than later, but I believe the world is changing. So what do you love about your life?
Probably little things. It's like spending time with my mom. It's coming across new movies or things where I see sign language or people with disabilities, and it's being creative. It's being with our furry terrors that live in our house that make life very exciting because they get into a lot of mischief, but are the most loyal, like, animals that have been around since I got sick. And they're the most calm, crazy bunch. They keep everything. Yeah. There's never a dull day in our household, despite the fact we don't get to get out very much. I think it's just those little things that I get very grateful for, and that I have a mom that supported everything I've gone through. Like, it doesn't matter if I pick up 5 new hobbies in a week. She's like, cool, okay, what are we learning about this week? Like, I've never had that. You have to focus on this one thing and you must do it to this degree. Like, she has always been adaptable and encouraging, and that's passed on to me and something I'm very grateful for.
Brilliant. So what fills you up, Alina? What recharges your batteries and gives you the energy to participate in all the projects you have going on?
I think it's a mix of creativity. Like, I don't get energy from doing things. It's kind of the opposite, even like mental energy. Doesn't really happen in my world unless it's like energy zoomies where I'm overtired and my body's like, oh, we can do all the things, even though we can't do all the things. I would probably definitely be creative, like finding something that day, whether it's trying to paint or I'm working on ideas for a new painting or a writing thing. Being in that space is what refills me. Or reading. That's all been consistent since I was a kid. I was a massive bookworm. I lost it for a little bit after a head injury. It made reading pretty difficult. But it's opened up that world again and getting to fall in another one, and anything is possible in books. So it's really cool, and it always makes me feel a bit more hopeful afterwards.
How beautiful. How beautiful that you find whatever you need to fill yourself up. Because we, usually in our world, we look on the outside for, whether it's food, whether it's drugs or shopping or sex or whatever, right? To give us that high, right? And in a way, you cannot eat much, so that's out of the question. Listening to music is not really something you can do. You're kind of restricted to being at home, and still you create whatever your own experience, which is so priceless and so beautiful.
I hear that a lot of people when they talk about, oh, I couldn't leave the house. I'm thinking, what, a month? Like a few weeks, they're like, oh no, a day, 2 days. I'm like, wait, what? Like, what's the big thing with that? Because my world is that I've been stuck at home for 6 months where we weren't allowed contact with anyone because my immune system had dropped so low. So it's never a source of when I want to fill myself up. Same with my mom, even if she really wants to, she still is caring for me around the clock. So we have to balance it around when symptoms are manageable, and 9 times out of 10, it will be too hot or there will be something that is blocking that. So you have to find it where you're at. And I've noticed a lot of people struggle with that because they do have that option of going and calling a friend, going and seeing a friend, going on an adventure. Like, they're amazing ways to fill yourself up. but not everyone has access to that. And I think that's where it's really hard. Sometimes is when you don't have access to those things, it can be more challenging. And they're the first things people suggest when you're struggling. I can't count the amount of times I hear it, like in a week, from people that I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And I'm like, you realize I can't access that this is how we manage and how I fill myself up, because I can't go and do those things. And I have to block that from my mind, because otherwise I won't cope and I will be sad all the time. You have to find those things in your world that you can find in that moment where you are, rather than outside of it.
And
Very true. Yeah. I mean, it's the keys to happiness, really. If when we're focusing on what's missing in our life, then we're left with not appreciating what we have. But when you can stay grounded with what am I given in this day, and I'm going to be grateful for it, that's the absolute key to happiness. But we live in a world where we have access to so much and so much choice that we think we need so much to make us happy, when I think the simpler, the better sometimes.
Slow living in a way. Back to the simple things. I think it's a balance with gratitude, because I hear it a lot from people that I should be grateful for things. I should be grateful, for whatever I have. And sometimes when words are overused, they can become like a tripwire for your emotions of, you start to not like that but not see it for the goodness that's in it. Because it's that balance of, you're allowed to not be happy with your word or how things are happening. And yeah, what's happening to a lot of people is not fair at all. And it's point blank. There's no way to sugarcoat that. It's awful. And I think if people could find that balance of allowing the space for gratitude or enjoyment with what they have in the moment, without forcing someone to be overly grateful or overly blue-eyed all the time about, oh, this is the best it can be. There needs to be a balance in emotions, otherwise you will tip off the scale eventually.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, of course, we need to have space for, whether we're sad or grieving or whatever. I think that's the other key too. What you were saying, that balance, when we block all those emotions, that's not healthy either, right? So there has to be, but when we live in this fantasy world of like, I need this unattainable thing to be happy, instead of really appreciating all that's around us that we can be grateful for. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you the most grateful for?
I'd probably say my mom, if that doesn't sound true. That's been a consistent, like, I could have anything, I could do anything, but I'd still pick having her over anything else, because that's been a consistent. She has been my person since I was a kid, and it doesn't matter what stage in my life I'm in or whether I'm having a bad body day. She's always kind of amazed me, because she just takes me for how I am that day. Like, it was never, if I was having a bad day when I was a kid, that, oh, you're being bad. It's like, okay, how can we get that energy and emotion out in a positive way? And I've seen her with my friends. She was the first person I'd grab if one of them was struggling and I didn't know what to do. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go through life with anyone else. She is pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
She is. Absolutely. So, Alina, if you had a magic wand and could give people any quality, what would it be and why?
I think I'd have to say deep listening. My go-to before was always empathy, because I don't think you could ever lack enough empathy for people. But I've seen more and more what I really wish people would do is listen, and actually listen and take things on board. I think empathy is beautiful and is so important, but sometimes what comes with that is not helpfulness of whether someone's being really empathetic. And by being empathetic, they think they know what's better, what's best, and how you should do the thing from an outside of you, instead of listening to the person and seeing how they can best support them from their experiences as the person who lives in it 24/7. I think deep listening is really what makes the difference between someone feeling isolated and feeling supported, because even if you don't know what to do or you don't have the power to do anything, allowing someone to feel heard, understood in a safe space and not judged can be more helpful than any medicine, than any physical anything. That's what's lacking majorly in, health issues and disability support and all of that, is people not trying to fix it, not trying to think that they know what's best or what's better, but listening to the person who is living it and valuing what they are living and following by their lead to try and make their world a little bit easier, and also integrate them into their own world in a way that is manageable.
Yeah, just stopping to ask how can they help instead of assuming that they know how to help you, right?
100%. That's the constant battle, even with disability support, because I had that aspect of my work in sort of disability, trying to help with services and making things more accessible. But I also have a disability, so I need those services to be out in the world, like an interpreter and, support workers to try and help with the physical things that I can't do anymore. But it's that same thing if they've worked in disability for some time, and so they believe they have an understanding of, what that would mean. But one person can have the exact same illness as $500, and it can affect them in a completely different way, and their world can be so different. And it's the one thing that always makes me tired, and my main frustration is people not listening. Well, they listen and they think, but they've listened and taken what they believe is right from it, and then they used to twist it to what they think is needed or what's best, and they're not open to hear anything after that. And that's the most major frustrating thing, I think, with disability, that I wish people would just listen more and be open to what the person is saying, not what they think is being said or should be said.
Really good. So, Alina, tell us, this one has a couple of pieces. You can answer how you want. So tell us about a time you took a chance on love. And this could be romantic love, self-love, passion project love, however you want to answer that.
I'm not someone that's very great at letting people in. I have my person, which has been my mom, but I've not really had family support growing up, and I'm not the greatest person at socializing. I love people, um, but I kind of do it. People don't always love me so much, so it can be challenging. But I'd had one person, and it was really funny because it's the most unexpected. It was a farmer who lived in the country town I grew up in, and I'd known him since I was a baby. He somehow became this person in my world that was like the other person I had for 21 years, almost 21 years of my life. He stepped up when my family had stepped out and, wanted me to know I had this other person. And it was really scary for me because I just had, big people in my life step away. It was up to me to look after my mom, who was unwell. He was like 10, 11 at the time. And he was a consistent, but it was in such a quiet way. Like, he was always supportive, but most people didn't even know, after we left and moved to Cairns that we were still in contact, or let alone he'd come and visited us in Cairns. He passed away recently, and we had people calling us to let us know, not realizing my mom had been on the phone to him every week, and the ones who was in hospital, and I was emailing and getting told off for sending essays, which were like 2 paragraphs, but in his world they were essays, and they would take a very long time to read. But he loved art, and he was so supportive of me learning. But if I hadn't have kind of let down that wall when everything in my world kind of crumbled, I wouldn't have had that person, and that person was very unexpected. Like, you would not expect a whale, a farmer who had like no kids or family, to step into your world like that. But I found out he'd done that for another person growing up as well, and that is really, really, really special and something I don't think I'll ever forget.
That's so
Really,
precious.
yeah, it's really special when you can open up your heart to someone like that and let them impact you on such a profound level. And just that you kept in contact for so long is it's even more special. So really nice. And now you have an angel that watches over you. So mhm.
So, what do you want people to remember about you?
I think just I hope to be a safe person. I think a lot of people are missing that safe space, or it's hard to find people that, yeah, feel truly safe, or like there's no judgment, that you can just be you. And I think I would be immensely, immensely happy um, if I was remember someone that was safe for other people to just be themselves.
I think we can all relate to that, right? Like how special life would be if that was where we all came from. Like very different. Very different.
Well, there's no judgment, there's no comparing, there's just you.
You're
And
just free to be, right? You're
yeah,
just mhm.
and that's priceless. That always is priceless if we can provide that for people.
Yeah,
I think it's something very special.
it is. So who do you want to be when you grow up? Like if you could be or do anything, there are no limitations, money, physical body limitations, what would you be and why?
I think this question really, really stumped me because so much of my world has been just one foot in front of the other. Like for a long time, I couldn't even think about anything besides like the next step of getting to walk or the next step of doing the thing. But all I can think about when that comes to my limitations is just getting to live and do all of the things. Like follow whatever interests I have, travel, do different jobs, not have that block everywhere of having to think about what can I do or how can I manage this. But it's just being able to do all the things and try and create safe spaces for other people in different areas of the world. Um, get to be a part of seeing more representation in different people and stories. I think ultimately, yeah, just be letting creativity go crazy and not having that limit of how many hours I can spend on it or where, being able to travel and just meet and connect with people. Yeah, just having that freedom to be without having to think about like that math equation again of what I want to do versus what I can do, to just be and do and not have to think about every minute of the day of having a shower. What's that going to cost me? It's okay, I have this list of things I'm working on in these different projects, and I have this thing to do and that thing to do, and then I get to socialize with them. That would be my ultimate if I could be anything when I grow up, it would just be to live and get to experience life to the fullest.
That is so extremely powerful. You know, most of us spend our times worrying or thinking about what we should do or haven't done or whatever, and just be and just live and just follow what brings joy is such a big lesson. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm just also so moved by the possibility, Alina, of you creating this accessibility for people with disabilities around the globe, right? So that it makes travel accessible to so many more people, and just or even just daily life becomes more accessible to more people. Like that's such a huge possibility, and to see your face light up when you speak about it is exciting too, right? So, and it's funny because I know Nico Martinez's son also has the same kind of thought in his head about making the world more accessible. So maybe this is something you may team up on and create more possibilities for the future. Who knows?
I'd love to, especially my aim with Chronic Youth at the beginning, at the moment with resources, is I want to create digital things. Things are available to anyone wherever they are, but to bring as many hobbyists, like a free library of videos, but that teaches things in accessible ways. So you have XYZ options of how you could draw the thing, or how you could write like a screenplay, or do animation or electronics, like different things that can be done from bed, but with 5, 6 different ways that you can do it. If you have hand control issues, if you have vision issues, if you have hearing issues, because it is so tiring finding thing a class you want to learn and then having to de-accessibilize it, of like trying to work out how you can access this thing because you can't do it the same way that they're explaining it to you. And it can be like a head mess because they're saying you have to do it this way. If you don't do it this way, you're not doing it right. But you can't do it that way physically. So I want to create more of that safe space, especially for guys and girls. I want to make it a bit more even out in the community because there's so much advocacy with women, which is incredible. But I feel like also guys in the community are getting left behind more because it's very physical. A lot of them wear sports players and things like that, and they can't do that anymore. And their world seems to be centered more around that, where girls tend to lead, especially to be more creative, or those more easy body things. I want to find that balance where they can find a new outlet that's not so isolating, I think.
Yes,
That makes sense.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, Lena, last question. What are you most proud of? Like, is there something you consider your biggest accomplishment? What are you most proud of?
It's probably going to sound silly because in the scheme of things, I know what that answer should be in terms of what I've had to relearn with relearning to walk and relearning to talk. Basically everything because I had paralysis from head to toe. But for me, it was learning to draw because it was the first thing I got to choose for myself. After I started physical rehab, my entire world every day of the week was surrounding 5 different therapies to just try and learn how to function. But that was the first thing I got to pick for me. And I went from not being able to sign my own name on documents, like my mom was having to sign on my behalf because I couldn't get the pen to work. I couldn't get my signature out, to drawing digitally. And that was when I started creating some of the designs for Chronic Youth, which was literally just tracing letters on my iPad for hours, just trying to get my hands back to then. I started studying fine art, and now I am trying to get disability into fine art because you don't see anyone that's in a wheelchair or is deaf or any sort of physical representation in like the old masters or like the really beautiful fine art. You see it more in digital art, but I'm really proud of the fact that I've gotten to the point where I'm working on that now. That's serious. And I put in the base drawing and I just kind of sat back. I'm like, whoa, I actually did that because I can't see it properly. My eyes are a nightmare, blurry. It took me a year to figure out how to draw when I couldn't see the end of the pencil properly. And I can't see half the lines that I put down. It did 6 months to do a class. It should have taken me a week because I had to figure out how to do that with my hand control, but also with my vision loss. And I had to read captions, which takes me like 5 times as long to figure out how to listen. So that would probably be what I'm most proud of.
Julie, did you want to share a little bit about your project Chronic Youth?
I started the idea of Chronic Youth when I was 16 because I'd never met anyone else that was like me. like as in chronically ill, had grown up undiagnosed. So I started originally, I knew I wanted to create resources, but I wanted to do it in a way that was manageable for me with my own health. So I started working on the idea of apparel. I started with hoodies and necklaces. I actually haven't launched the necklaces, but I designed my own from one of my drawings of a butterfly. I wanted to fund creating the resource, but also give something tangible and physical, kind of like a football club. You know, everyone wears the same jerseys and they're part of a larger community. But for people that are unwell or have kind of funky bodies, to know that on those bad days they're wearing this really comfy clothing, that even if they don't see anyone that day, they're still connected to a larger group. Then it was figuring out what I wanted to do with the resources, and that is ebbed and flowed. At first, I wasn't really sure what to do because everything is centered around medical appointments and how to manage medical appointments. And then the more I got into it, I realized it doesn't matter how well you know how to manage those appointments, you're still going to hit the same roadblocks. But it is having those outlets, so those things that you can do to manage those bad pain days, or the days you can't get out of bed. So that's my focus now, is funding resources, bringing experts with disability. I'd love to eventually be able to collaborate with OTs and things, like have it as a resource library that OTs and doctors suggest to clients who are chronically ill to check out, because there aren't resources like that where they can learn new things, find outlets that they could eventually turn into business opportunities if they want to. Aim is to make it free though, because when you have a disability, it's hard to get work, it's hard to earn money. So it's hard enough to get the education to then do the thing is one of those major barriers. So I'm trying to cut out the middleman there.
Such a fantastic project. So if people want to contact you about getting in touch with maybe funding, or if they want to participate, or if they want to purchase any of your stuff, how can they get in touch with you?
They could check out chronicyouthaustralia.com or contact me through justalina.com. Both of them kind of connected. Yeah, they can definitely contact through there. And you might also see some of my art, which I'm trying to bring over to Chronic Youth as well.
Fantastic. And we will include links. So if anyone wants to check out Alina's art or her projects, we will have the links for everyone to do that. We want to thank you, Alina, so much for being here today. It was just our honor. We had a blast. So if you enjoyed today's podcast, if you loved it, please leave us a message. Please share with your friends. And please remember that you are extraordinary and you rock. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Martina? You're on mute, Martina.
Oops, I'm on mute. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.